whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watch, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glint, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Good evening. Not an easy topic tonight to speak about, to say the least. Many of us did not want to come tonight. It's not for everybody. But this evening was long time due. From all the questions we received from the community about the topics we're going to discuss tonight. It's not an easy time. It's not an easy time to live in these days. There's a lot of pain out there. And some, you can ask why are we talking about these things, but it's important to know. Because all the speakers that are going to share with you tonight are at the forefront of the work that is being done every single day, every single night. And many of you could actually be also sitting here for the amazing work you do. The Gemara says, those that, if a person wants to save himself from the from the pain of Mashiach, which by all means we are right now living in. And chaplains and all the Askanim and the volunteers that are here tonight are doing this day in, day out. So I want to thank you for the amazing work you do. One day, someone gave me a hard time, and I complained about that idea to a Rav. And I said to him, listen, we dedicate our lives to Tzafet Tzibur, and people don't recognize this. How come? I didn't sign up for this. So he says to me, don't worry, I pray for you every Shabbos. V'cholmi, she'oiskim, b'tzafet tzibur, b'emunah, and the rest. We pray for you guys every day, and they pray for us. They pray for us to succeed in what we do. The true nichumim that we will get, as the Rebbe says, it would be, the true nichumim will be the nechamas tzion Yerushalayim, where we're going to have bila amavis lanetzach. U'macha Hashem esdima me'al kol panim. I'd like to thank those who made tonight possible, specifically Chaplain Tal, who has been amazing, Chaplain Yankee Elephant, the Wallerstein family, specifically my partner in the junior chap division, Rav Zacharia Wallerstein. This evening is for the Aliyah of His Neshama. Obviously, Chaplain Fine, Shelley Fine, good friend and a fine person, Rabbi Zohn. Chaplain Weill, Korsinsky, and we're missing one. Maybe he's here, maybe he's not. Here we go. Moti, your seat is right here. Okay. Moti Zilber from Mr. Broadway, and her staff Hani, Yitzi Dutch, who took care of the lights. Look how beautiful this is tonight. Amazing. Good work. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the volunteers, Chaplain Birnbaum. Thank you to the Rabbanim who came tonight. Thank you to those that are working. Okay, we are the only chaplain organization in America that trained a chaplain who is deaf. And he's here tonight. Chaplain Dach is here. I personally trained him. For him, we have two.
He's embarrassed.
He's good. He's a teacher for the state of New York. Teaching for 32 years, I believe. 32 years, kids.
He said 30. You could definitely be 30.
30 years. He's a teacher. Very good. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Really, thank you for being here tonight. We were supposed to have a Zoom. It didn't work out, a live Zoom, but this evening is recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, and enjoy. I'm going to do it. Come stay here. Yeah, it's part of my yes. Thank you, Shelley. Well respected. Shem Tov, which is something that is not for everybody to keep, but he, with Hashem's help and the amazing work he has done for so many, many families around the world, helped guide us, teach us. And tonight, it's an honor to have you, Rabbi Zohn. Shlita, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chaplain Coën. To all the members of the panel, Chaplain Fine, all those who helped make this possible, I'm deeply honored to be here and to be able to present to a group of people who really model what all Jews are supposed to model, which is we model the ways of Hashem. There's no mitzvah in the Torah that says you need to be a Baal Chesed. The mitzvah in the Torah is v'halachta b'drachav, you should walk in his ways. And you walk in his ways, you are Soimchei Neuflim, Zoikvei Kefufin, Mevakrei Chaylim, Lavim Mesim. Those are the things that Hashem does, and this is your life. You've dedicated yourselves to this as volunteers, and it's a tremendous zechus to be here. It's a difficult topic. I always find myself speaking about difficult topics, because why else would they invite me if it wasn't a difficult topic? But it's important to recognize that as difficult as this topic is, it is really a tremendously powerful insight into life and the importance of life. And as such, it has tremendous ability to uplift and to strengthen each of us and those are the people that we deal with. I remember a story that I once heard from the well-known psychologist David Pelkowitz. He said over this story, he told the story about a young boy whose father worked in Fenway Park. He was a groundskeeper in Fenway Park. And one day, the kid was off from school, and he had a meeting at the park, and he took his son along with him to the park. So this young boy gets up at the park, in the park, where the greats of baseball played, and he stands at home plate, there's nobody there, with his bat and his ball. And this young boy looks out on the field and he says, I am the greatest baseball player who ever lived. He throws up the ball, makes a swing, and misses it. The ball rolls away, he runs after it, and he gets back up at the front, at a home plate, and he looks out, he says, I am the greatest baseball player who ever lived. Throws up the ball again, takes a swing and misses it. This goes on over and over again. One of his father's friends is sitting in the stands watching this, and finally he's had enough, and he walks up to the young man, he says, kid, what's the matter with you? You keep saying, I am the greatest baseball player who ever lived, and you keep throwing up and missing the ball. The kid turns around, he says, mister, have you ever seen pitching like that? I don't know if you're familiar with the game, but if you are, you'll understand. The point is that everything has a perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about life and end of life. And the truth is that the end of life is extremely powerful. We go through life thinking that we are not going to ever have to deal with end of life. The Pasuk tells us, Pasuk we say every day, Vadi Omarti B'Shalvi, I say when things are in peace, when things are calm, I will never be moved, I will never be shaken. Things are just going to go on that way. I can tell you how far it goes. I had a stroke a few years ago, and even so, and today you wake up and you say, Baruch Hashem, things are fine, we got to a certain point and it's going to continue like that. That is our way of thinking. Hashem created us that way, and we need to recognize that there is a reality. And for those of us who are involved in that, in a certain sense, it's an extreme zechus. We wake up every morning, and the first thing a Jew says every morning is, Moidani lefanecha, I give thanks to you, Hashem, Melech Chai v'Kayim, the King who is alive and eternal, Shehechazarta bi nishmasi. I have my neshama, I have another day of life. You don't talk about the Lexus in the driveway. You don't talk about all the Baruch Hashem mishpachas that we have, all good things we have in life. Shehechazarta bi nishmasi, and every day of life has tremendous value. The Gemara tells us that Yaakov Avinu was the first one who was a chayla who was sick. Until that time, their time came to die, they sneezed, and they died. That's why we say Gesundheit, because it was that a person would die just by sneezing. They didn't know when, they didn't know how, they didn't know where. That's how they died. And Yaakov Avinu, the Gemara tells us, it's a Gemara in a few places, Gemara Metzia, Pezayin. The Gemara says that Yaakov l'havachusha, there was no weakness or illness until Yaakov. Also Yaakov and boy Yaakov came and was mispalel. He asked for Rahmanis. He asked that Hashem give him an indication that he will know that he's going to die. Imagine that, asking for illness. For what purpose? So that he could prepare. He could prepare himself. He could prepare his children. He could make sure that everything's in place. I think that in our world, the need for preparation is of the greatest importance on many different levels. It's not easy. But we need to think about it. We need to be prepared. Tonight's panel is called Best Practices. And probably the first best practice is to think about the fact that the people around us, and ourselves included, are not going to be here forever. And there are going to be issues that we need to prepare for, because if we are prepared, we will be able to deal with them in a world that is sometimes not easy to navigate. And the first and most important of these things to prepare is really a living will, which means that we need to name someone that will speak on our behalf should the situation arise where we are ill and we can't speak on our own behalf. That is something that we need to do at the age of 18. That's what it says in the Aguda, I believe, in the Aguda directions. And it's true. Someone is 18. Michael, is that correct? 18?
You can do it at 18.
You can't do it before that, but you need it at 18. If a person is in a situation where they have no one to speak for them, and certainly if, I imagine parents have a certain say, but when push comes to shove, if they're in a hospital situation and the hospital believes differently than the parents, would parents have the right at 18? Or not really if there was no directive?
The question is, you're saying at the hospital...
If there was a disagreement between the hospital ethics committee and the parents.
That's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question, okay. We'll leave that for the panel later, but in any case, the idea is every person needs to have a living will. They need to have a shaliach that gives them the right to have patient autonomy. That speaks for them. But we as Yidden, we as Jews, need to have a living will that doesn't only designate a person to act in your behalf, but also someone to make decisions that are of the greatest importance. Decisions that are about life and death. And we live in a world today where hospitals very often take positions that are very contrary to Torah law and to Torah observance. So while the hospitals may mean well, and while this may be the ethic of the day, and you will have a hospital doctor or nurse or whoever, social worker, sit with a family and make them feel that to continue certain medical procedures is cruel, and that they are the ones who have the Rahmanas. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the halacha. And we need to recognize that. I remember hearing a beautiful vart that's easy to remember because when you say it in shul every day, it'll come back to you. At a Torah Masar, actually Ezra's Torah Malav Malka years ago, Rabbi Yosef Grumblatz, who was then the Rav of the Queen Jewish Center, said this over. He was talking about Torah, and he said over the brisa that we say every morning, Elu Dvarim we list a lot of beautiful mitzvahs. After we say the Berachas HaTorah, we list mitzvahs that are beautiful mitzvahs that all of us are involved in. All kinds of mitzvahs that are beautiful mitzvahs. And at the end we say the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the study of Torah is equal to all of them. And the obvious generally accepted explanation is that if you put all of these beautiful mitzvahs on one side of the scale and you put Torah on the other side of the scale, Torah would balance out all of these. It's equal to all of them. Rabbi Grumblat wanted to say that there's another meaning. And that is, the word kineged means as a reflection of. Like Ezer Kinegdo, a woman and a husband together make up a perfect whole. One complements the other. So he said, Talmud Torah Keneged Kula means that in order to know how to be Mevaker Chola, in order to know how to do Chesed, you need Torah to reflect upon it. You need the Torah to tell you how to do it. You might spend the day visiting someone in the hospital where you take a train for 2 hours and you sit with them and they just had a heart attack and you take their hand and you say, Jack, you're going to need to lose about 50 pounds and you're going to need to take yourself in hand and you're going to have to stop working all these crazy hours. You need a vacation. And just about at this time, Jack is ready for another heart attack. So the idea is that you meant well. You gave up your day. But it's not what the Torah expects of us. That's not Bikur Cholim al Pi Torah. And the same is true with Havayas HaMeis, and the same is true with everything that we do. Being involved in Chesed means doing Chesed how the Torah would like you to do Chesed. Of course, first and foremost is empathy. But the Torah has the direction, even when you're dealing with people who don't live by Torah. Emotions are the same for everyone. And you need to know that within Torah there is a way to deal with people who are not necessarily learned and are not necessarily observant. There are two worlds that we deal with as chaplains. One is this world, the medical world, which we spoke about just a little bit, living wills, and the recognition that the Torah view is that we believe in sanctity of life, and that life is worth living even when it might be not the greatest quality of life. I remember Judge Moti Ritholtz, who's a good friend of mine, once said, I believe it was at an Aguda program, he said, when quality of life replaces sanctity of life, society has done itself irreparable harm. And we live in that society. So we need to recognize this comes up when people are making decisions about going into hospice. What kind of hospice? What can be done? Will the hospice agree to provide nutrition and hydration? And if the person gets an infection, will they agree to begin a new protocol of medication? All these things fall within the parameters of halacha. So a living will needs to be something that has not only the agent, but also a rabbinic guide, someone who will guide us. This living will, at least the halachic living wills, at least the one by the Aguda, it used to be the one by RCA. RCA just changed their living wills. I'm not sure, I haven't seen it. But that living will of the Aguda also provides the person who is the agent with the power post-mortem, that person will also be the agent after death. So there are really two aspects of end of life that we deal with. One is the value of life before death, living the way we are supposed to live until our time comes. That doesn't mean that every single situation we can never sign a DNR, we have to go through every kind of a procedure. No, it's not so. But it needs guidance. Moshe Feinstein, Zefar Levracha, writes, Chayim, life, Coën Nitzchias, buys eternity, b'chol rega, in every second. I'll tell you a story. It's a powerful thought. It's that pitch. It's looking at end of life as a pitch. Every minute of life, even when we're in a difficult situation, buys eternity. Once life has ended, we don't have that opportunity anymore. It's a Mishnah in Avos. I'll just touch on that for a second. The Mishnah in Avos it's one Mishnah, it's cryptic. It says 1 minute in this world, Olam Hazeh, is greater than all of Olam Haba. And then the next line says 1 minute in Olam Haba is greater than everything in Olam Hazeh. What could that mean? I left out a few words intentionally. It says 1 minute of Torah and Ma'asim Tovim in this world, of serving Hashem in this world, is worth all of eternity, because after we leave, we can't do this anymore. We can't purchase that eternity that Moshe was talking about. Imagine, a minute buys eternity. We can't fathom eternity, but that's what it is. I'll tell you a story. And on the other hand, the reward in Olam Haba, the koras ruach, the comfort, the geschmack, whatever you want to call it, the beauty, the peace, the tranquility of Olam Haba, of the world to come, one moment of that is greater than anything we could possibly conceive of in this world. So each world has its place. And in this world, every minute of life is important. Try to be very quick. We say this on Yom Kippur, when everyone is very tired, many people probably falling asleep or step out, that's where they go out. We talk about the Asara Haruge Malchus, the 10 people who were killed because of the sins of Klal Yisrael, whatever it was, these 10 great tzaddikim were killed to mechaper the Averis of Plies, or whatever that was. One of them, it says two were taken out first. One was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi, who was the head of Klal Yisrael. He was the chief rabbi, if you will, and Reb Yishmael Kohen Gadol. And there was a lot drawn as to who would be the first. It turned out that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was to be killed first. And it says Reb Yishmael Kohen Gadol took his head. They decapitated him. And he took his head and he screamed in the most bitter scream. Asks one of the Mefarshim, trying to remember who it was, someone in Eretz Yisrael, might have been Reb Chaim, I'm not sure, one of the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael asked the question, how could Rabbi Yishmael ben Kohen Gadol take the head of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who was a Kohen? How can he be Metabe to the head of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Can't be Metabe, even though he's about to die, he still can't be Metabe. How could he take the head of a person who's dead? And his answer was, you think they just gave him the head because he asked for it? They're about to kill him. There was a negotiation, there was a discussion, and for whatever reason they decided they would let him do it. Maybe it fit in with their evil motives. But he bought himself a few minutes of life. And that life is pikuach nefesh, and it's worth it, and you're allowed to be metabe. That was his answer. What kind of life? Screaming pain, horrific agony. That's life. It's worth life. Every minute of life is tremendous value. Our Rosh Hashiva Zechron Brecher, Reb Henoch Leibowitz, was once asked to Shiloh. There was someone in the yeshiva who was terminally ill. It was a young person. She still had no married children. And she was sick for many years, but she was one of these women who had unbelievable faith. And at this point, she was in a coma. But we don't really know what happens when people are in a coma. By the way, something that everyone should know. I don't know if I'll get to that story, but it's important to know. When people are supposedly in a coma, they might be very well aware of what's going on around them on some level, and maybe even on a more conscious level than we would believe. But in this case, this woman suddenly developed a new infection. And the question was raised, do we have to start medication? She was literally utot. She was not well at all. There was no question. She was not coming back. And Roshim wouldn't paskin the shaila, and he sent it to one of the Gedolei Hador to paskin, and the answer was, you do not have to begin a new treatment. That was the answer. She's already terminal, it's not going to do anything, and you don't have a chi. If you want to, you can, but you have no chi. They came back to the Roshim. Roshim's answer was the following. I accept the psak of the Gadol Hador, but I cannot identify with it. How can someone put a price on a minute of such life? A woman who accepts this life, and she's now living another moment. Chazal say, Pam b'tzar mimea pa'amim shaloi b'tzar. A person gets more credit for a minute when they are in pain, and it doesn't mean horrific pain, but it's difficult, than 100 times when it's not difficult. That life, when we are shehachazat be nishmasi, when all we have is our neshama, but we accept it and we are living, that life is way more powerful. A moment of life could be worth a year of other life when things are great, when you're bishalva. Who can put a price on that? So we need to recognize when we are dealing with people that they need to be appropriately prepared. We need to be prepared. We need to prepare those around us to make sure that we have something in place, both in this world, but it's medical, and for the afterlife as well. We need to do that. We live in a world where end of life, the decisions that are being made at end of life are very complicated. There are so many different elements to this. There are autopsy questions. I live in neighborhood where there are a lot of Russian people. Many Russian people, when they came in Russia, everyone was autopsied. We had to deal with hospitals so that we could work out with them that they would not automatically autopsy or even encourage autopsy. There were learning hospitals, places like North Shore, okay, that were learning teaching hospitals, and they had to produce a certain number of autopsies a year. And they would encourage these people who they knew were very vulnerable to it, because to them autopsy was common. The person died and they didn't know why exactly. It's a good idea, you want to know, maybe your children, maybe this, maybe all kinds of excuses. We fight autopsy because the halacha is that kikover tikvarenu b'yom, when a person dies, we're supposed to bury them on that day. And when it says kikover tikvarenu, that means in their entirety. A person is a tselem Elokim. A person is created in the image of Hashem. And I say this to you knowing full well that all of you know this. But it's important to be able to express it when you're speaking to people who don't know this. To them, they have no understanding at all of an afterlife. The average Jew out there may not necessarily believe that Judaism believes in an afterlife, because their rabbi, so-called, doesn't believe in the afterlife. There are many rabbis like that. This is what we need to understand, to recognize that the covenant that we have, the reason we are so important in life as well as afterlife is because we are the purpose of creation, and we are created as a tselem Elokim. We are what the world was created for. We are the purpose of creation. And we need to recognize that every life is extremely valuable, and that every person, not only before they die, but even after they die, represent the tselem Elokim. The reason the Torah gives us why we should bury someone is ki kilalas Elokim toloi, to keep a person unburied is a chilul Hashem. A person is a tselem Elokim. To leave a person in a state where they are desecrated, whether it's because they're just hanging around in a refrigerator or wherever it might be, or autopsied, that's a chisar, that's degrading to the tselem Elokim that they are. I'll just read to you from, interestingly, by the way, the reason the Torah gives why we shouldn't take another person's life is, I don't know if you remember this from Parshas Noach, but the pasuk says, "Shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam." Someone takes the blood of another person, damo yishafech, his blood is spilled. Ki b'tselem Elokim aso esa adam. That's the reason why a Ben Noach is not allowed to take life. It's because a person is in tselem Elokim. Says Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, every tiny minute of the earthly existence of even the most miserable human being is sacred to Hashem. And whosoever shortens his own or anybody else's life by 1 second is responsible to Hashem. I was on the phone yesterday with a man who calls me. He says he is observant. His family is not. But he wants to know if he could be buried in a Jewish cemetery if he agrees to have his doctor assist him when his time comes, because he doesn't want to go through any kind of unnecessary hardship and burden to others around him. He wants a doctor to help him, which I believe is now legal, or in New York State, certainly many states. And he wanted to know, will he be able to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, because he heard that a suicide can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. I told him he could be buried in a Jewish cemetery. I said preferably in the Reform section, but even in the Orthodox section, they would probably bury him anyway. But the fact is, I had a whole long discussion with him about what life is. It turned out he was very concerned. I could almost understand it. It was about financial issues. He was afraid they would wear out all the money, there'd be nothing left, and so on. We had a long discussion. But the idea is to recognize that the Torah's value is so very different. And that every minute of life that we can give another person, that we can help another person prepare for appropriately, is huge. Is a tremendous, tremendous Uscc. Also to help them understand that this world is really just a place to build ourselves for our eternity. And every moment of life is such a tremendous gift. And the more difficult it gets, the greater the gift. What a phenomenal idea. What a phenomenal idea. To wake up every morning charged. Modani Lefnecha was not meant to wake us up depressed. It was meant to wake us up charged with more energy and more energy. And we have to be able to convey that to the people that we speak to with empathy, with a sense of, but to fully understand it and to believe it so that we can convey it appropriately. I know it's getting late, so I'm going to run on two things that I wanted to point out in the whole code. Okay? Do I have another few minutes? One is vidui. Tremendous zechus of saying vidui. And to say vidui means what they call it the last rites. What it basically means is that you ask the Ribono Shel Olam that if you are meant to die, that you accept that, and that should be a kapara, that should be a forgiveness. That's what vidui is all about. The most important part of vidui is these words. Yirotzen shetei misasi kapara al kol avodaisai. What does that mean? May it be the will of Hashem that my passing should be a kapara for all of my sins. If the person can't talk, say it to them. And how do we say it? Do we say it in the singular? Do we say it, your death should be a kapara? The halach is you say it in the singular. You say to them, my death, because they're listening and they have in mind their own. But you say it's a little scary, but that's what you say. One thing you should not say is, Yirotzen that my death should be a kapara, that your death should be a kapara on my sins, that wouldn't be fair. But to say that my death, that's the way to say it. It's meant to say it that way. How do you explain this to a person that's not from? I'll tell you, years ago, I was in this situation, and I came up with the following idea, and I share it because it's something you won't hear. And that is, I've told people, we go through life, we have a lot of questions. And sometimes we're angry. Sometimes we don't understand. But now, we are coming to possibly to the end of our life. We say vidui, we always tell someone we never know. Saying vidui doesn't mean we've given up. It just means that if something happens, we're prepared. I tell them, you might be meeting the Ribono Shel Olam. You might be. You don't really believe, you don't know, but you might be. Don't you want to meet him peacefully? Don't you want that if you do meet him, that you ask that he forgive you? Why don't you take this time to forgive him for all the things that you may be questioning? Why don't you meet him at a time where you have forgiven him and at the same time ask that he forgive you? If this is your time, why don't we make peace? You forgive the Ribono Shel Olam. You accept that whatever happened, this was his wish for whatever it was. At the same time, ask that he forgive you. I found it to be something that is very, very acceptable at that time. I think family around them should be told what you're doing. Sometimes when family listens, they find it strange, but I think if you explain it in advance, it's very, very important. But then I'll end with what I think most people expect me to talk about the entire night, and that is cremation. The thing that you need to prepare for in our world more than anything else, and reach out to people around us, whether it's your cousin who lives in Missouri, or whether it's a childhood friend who might still live not far away but isn't from it all. If they live in Manhattan, there's a very good chance they're going to be cremated. The person you work with, Open a conversation before they're sick. Figure out a way to do it. Joan Rivers died and she was cremated. Great way to open a conversation. Why would a woman like Joan Rivers want to be cremated? She was such a Yiddish mama, you know, she loved Israel, she spoke about, and you go into a conversation. There are a million ways to open this conversation, but you should be aware that 50% of Yidden in the United States are getting cremated. 50%, I think it's more, but it's at least that. And there are answers that can be given. There's a website that we have that I think you should all be aware of. It's called LastKindness.org or .com, which addresses this issue for people who are secular, for people who are not from. It makes very, very valid arguments just out of respect. When people tell me, well, it's my decision, it's my life, and I say, absolutely not. It's your decision and it's your life, but you're making a statement about me. By burning yourself, we don't burn things that are of value. We don't burn things that we love. Your statement is that all of us are dispensable. You make the statement that we are basically what we burn, which is trash. We bury treasure. We burn trash. We burn that which we want to get rid of and dispose of. So you're making the statement about my Tzelem Elokim. What does it mean for your family? There's so many psukim to Tehillim where Hashem talks about the Russia. He says, you can't find him anymore. It's gone. It's mamish describing the person that gets cremated. What does it mean for family? There's no place to visit. You keep the ashes, you sprinkled it somewhere beautiful. What does that mean? It's how could anyone sell you such a ridiculous concept? But the idea is you can talk to them, and it's not because the Torah said so, and it's not because they're Olam Haba, they're Trias HaMesim. They don't know if you have time. You can talk about all this stuff. But the idea is there's so much to talk about that's just seichel, that's just logical, that we need to open those conversations and be mezakeh every Jew with a life that they understand the value of. It's an opening. End of life is a perfect pitch to talk about the most important things in life, which is why we are alive, what the purpose of life is, what the value of life is, and what we do at the end of life to prepare for eternity. And then to talk about all the things. There is a form here that you can get them to sign. And it's extremely important that not only you talk to them, but once they decide to be buried, you have them sign something. We fought a case, Michael, you'll appreciate this, with Moshe Kurtzman, probably about 12, 15 years ago. And I remember I was involved. We went to court twice. This woman was 105. Her father learned by Rabbi Elchonon. And we fought. She wanted to be cremated. She went off the derech. She grew up in America. She wanted to be in Hollywood. She moved. Her father was a Rav and a Sheikh in North Dakota. She moved to New York. She became an actress, married a man. He wanted to be cremated. They both agreed to be cremated. All her life, everyone knew Ethel's getting cremated. One of her great nephews became a frum, started talking to her, and at 103, she decided she agreed to be buried. And he called her nephew, who was his cousin, to tell him that the will that she wrote to be cremated, he has to change it because she's agreed to be buried. He said, no problem. But of course, he never changed it. So 2 years later, she dies. And now he insists it's in her will to be cremated. She had a need to be cremated. This is the issue. They must sign it. Speak to people around you. There's no greater chesed, no greater gift. And I will end with one thought that says, again, we say this every day, Elu dvarim she'en lahem shir. There are certain things that have no limit. One of them is chesed. Gemilas chasadim has no shir. It doesn't only mean that you have to be a hero, you have to do heroics, you have to jump out in the middle of the night and go run and do whatever chesed. Yeah, we do that. Solo does it. There's no sheer. But it also means on the lower level there is no sheer. Every little thing we do that helps someone get through a difficult situation, we guide them, we help them along. And particularly if we do it with Talmud Torah Keneged Kula, we do it as the Torah would want us to do it. There's no limit to what's a shear. A little smile is a shear, a little squeeze of the hand is a shear. Everything is chesed. You should continue to be able to do your chesed, al pi Torah, to be guided properly. And we're here, there are a lot of resources, you'll hear a lot of good things tonight. As Ezer Hashem, we should do it at Bia's goal and Meyer. Amen.
The Misaskin provides moral support and bereavement assistance to individuals and families, and at the same time safeguarding the dignity of the deceased. With great respect and appreciation, I call upon the Executive Director of the Misaskin, Chaplain, Meyer Weill.
Thank you. Good evening, all. First, I'd like to thank Chaplain Mendy Coën and the Uscc and everyone that was involved in tonight's event, and to bring it and put it together. It's a very informative and very much needed event. I'm also would like to say that I'm humbled and honored to stand here in the house of Zachariah. Zachariah was a friend of mine. I knew him well. He used Misaskim for some of his tzedakah cases a few times. Right there's a witness, and I just want to say that Zachariah should be a Meilutz Yosher for Esti and the family, and for all the mishpachas that he had come out of this building. What also I have to mention, because we're going to be talking about Misaskim, I have to mention my partner, Olav Shalom, Rabbi Meyer. Rabbi Meyer, everyone knows, was an unbelievable Baal Chesed, an unbelievable, his mind was way ahead of him. He was somebody that when it came to Chesed, thought ahead and knew exactly what is needed but for the individual, and then carried it out and put the plan together. So I just want to mention and thank you that I knew him for all those years, very close to him, and it was a tremendous chus, and he should be a Meilutz Yosher for Klal Yisrael, and his thing was Almanas and Yisayimim, and he should be a Meilutz Yosher for all. So we'll talk about Misaskim very little bit. Everyone knows Misaskim. Everyone knows Misaskim is a fancy chair delivery service. But there's a lot more to Misaskim that people don't know. I'm here to bring it out and to mention it. Besides the chairs and the Sefer Torahs and the tables and all the furniture that we give out, we do give out when needed. We give out meals to Shiva houses. When a tragedy strikes and there are Yisayimim and it's a house and it's there's no one there, there's no money, we send for the week. We'll send for Shabbos a big fancy meal. So that's the part that everyone seems to know. Misaskim has a side organization called Yedid. Yedid is where we actually go and we deal with the Yisayimim and the Almanas. It comes a yontif, every yontif these kids get trips. Our goal and object in Yedid is to make every Yassim and Almana feel like either their classmate or next door neighbor, and even if it means putting a smile on their face for an hour or so, it's worth the whole thing. It's an hour less of tsar that they have to go through. But we'll talk about the other things that Misaskim does tonight. So, all of us here in the room as chaplains, I do want to start out by saying, first of all, I'll just say a little Dvar that I heard a while ago, and Chaplain Coën mentioned it before. V'chol mishaskim b'tzarchet tziva b'emuna, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishalom scharim. We as chaplains have to understand that we're doing this, and we're doing this wholeheartedly. And the raya to that is the gematria of kol is 50, and the gematria of me is 50. So kol me, all of us that are doing it, Shaskim b'tzarchet tziva b'emuna, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishalom scharim. But as chaplains, we have to understand when we're dealing in these type of cases, in tragedies. Any death is a tragedy. Certain tragedies are worse than others. When we're dealing in these type of tragedies and we're being asked and we're getting involved, honesty and honesty and honesty is the ikr. Because that is when these families are going to gravitate to you, and that's when these families are going to trust in you. We have almanas that call us in the office at Misaskim all the time for things not related to death. Whether they need something fixed in the house, or whether they have an issue with a chassan. I'll tell you a story that happened 2 weeks ago. I got a text from a Sephardic rabbi. He says, so I'll just give you an introduction. Hanukkah, we give out toys, we give out Hanukkah geld for all the assignments so they can go buy something like everyone else is doing, all the other children are doing. And we also give them gebenchte dollars. We go around to the different rabbanim and we get a bracha from them. And they get $1 in a packet that has the bracha and who the gadol was. I got a text from a Rav that there's this yasam in the neighborhood that their school was going on a class trip. Naturally, they were financially strapped, and he wanted to go, and he paid for the trip with his gebenchte dollars. We're not talking a lot of money. He added it in. It's $6, $10. I don't know how many years he saved, but this is what he used. Okay, I texted back the rabbi. I'm going to send him another packet of gebenchte dollars plus extra cash that he could have if he wants to go on the trip and what to spend. Not knowing anything, in the middle of my conversation with the rabbi, the office gets a phone call, and I get the phone call afterwards that there is this almana that's making chasana next week, and she doesn't have money to pay. She's short. What do we do? So after hearing it from the office and from the rabbi, I started putting 2 and 2 together. It turns out the orphan, the yasam that the rabbi texted me about, is a son of the one that just called the office. And this is where we're trying to do in Misaskim, and we're working on this. There are organizations that help people with different things in need. And they reached out to one of the organizations, and they said, your application was too late, we can't do it. We went, we found out who's involved, and we fought. And that organization ended up giving $10,000 towards the wedding. The office staff was afraid that we weren't going to be able to get the organization to give, so they put out on their WhatsApp, a small WhatsApp, there's an almana looking to make a chasana, she doesn't have the money. Unbelievable that the office got another $10,000 for this chasana. So here, where we were sad that the yasam gave out the gebenchte dollars, that turned in that gebenchte dollars that he gave out ended up turning into his mother for $20,000. So you never know where these things and where the hashgacha is with this. But we help out with bereavement. Not necessarily are we the ones that doing it. A lot of chaplains know how to do it, and they do it. But we have the whereabouts and to know who to call in cases for bereavement where it's needed, because when we're dealing, especially in certain tragedies where there are young kids involved, we have to get the teachers involved, the principals involved. And we work with the family very closely to try to get the bereavement done. Another topic that I'd like to touch on that we do is death notifications. Death notifications today has become very, very hard. As a chaplain, it is very worth it to learn how to do notifications. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But because of social media, and people really don't care much, and they just like to post, we'll get misaskim now. We started a campaign, pause before you post. Family members don't know about it. They're finding out about it through social media, and that is very, very bad. The families get affected by this to no end. When you're dealing with death notifications, you have to know how to notify them. A lot of times you can't just walk into someone's house and say, oh, so-and-so, no, died in an accident. That's not the way to do it. There are ways to do it, and there are trainings on how to do this. You want to find out on a death notification, when you're doing a death notification, who are the immediate family members? Where are they located? Because they're going to find out through either social media or not through the proper channel. And that's very important. You can have people living out of town. You can have people living in other countries. You have to get the contact, the information, and to know how to do it. In the death notifications, USCC has a wide range of chaplains throughout the country. We can get other chaplains involved to help do the notification. We've used Misaskim volunteers to do notifications. They're trained and to go and do this. Again, I said when you're doing a death notification and you're going to somebody, you have to remember the person that you're going to does not really know who you are. So they are uncomfortable in the beginning with you being there. It is important to get a good friend of the man or woman, whoever's there, to get a good friend to come over. They need the shoulders to cry on. They need it. That is healthy. It's healthy to cry. The same thing when it comes into kids. Kids relate to their Rabbeim and to their principals. Find out who they are, what their numbers are, and get them over there. That helps them helps them to calm them down and to put things in perspective. When you are involved in these death notifications, you have to ask around or look around or hear and feel and see around what the dynamic of the family is. Not all families get along with each other. Some don't want this one to know. Some don't want to sit shiva with that one. You have to get to know the whole picture before you can start giving them information or telling them what to do, so you'll know how to deal this one and each one separately. Then I'd like to touch on there's a lot to touch on, but I'm limited in the time. So I'm going to try to just go through this just to know what we do, and we can always be reached to ask. Families ask a lot of times how to prepare for death. Their loved one is in the hospital. Their loved one is dying. What do I do? What do I need to prepare? How do I do this? So I find personally, as a chaplain, and if you're getting involved in getting these phone calls, you have to be very careful on how you're talking to that family member. I just had this past week where someone called me, and I don't refer to them as your father or your mother or your brother or your sister that's dying. I always, in third party, I say after 120. After 120, after 120. And after my conversation, the guy tells me, he says, oh, I really have to thank you because it made it more comfortable for me to talk about it, that you weren't specifically talking about my father or my mother or my brother or my sister. So there are ways that one should be talking to these family members to prepare. There are ways on how to do death notification, and let's say if it's a car accident, we will go in and we will do the death notification saying that so-and-so was in a terrible car accident. We don't have any update yet, but things are not looking so good. It puts that family member already in the mode of what the worst thing could happen without them being told instantly. Give me a few minutes, I'll get an update, and I'll get back to you. We wait a few minutes, we give them an update. We could see how that family member is doing, what's going to happen when he does get that news. If we have to wait a few more minutes, the more that it sets in, the easier it is later on, when he does get the final word. I'd like to now touch a little bit on the medical examiner. We have very close relationship with the medical examiner, and there are a lot of cases that end up by the medical examiner. The medical examiner, it's a city agency. Rabbi Zohn is also very involved with the medical examiner. As a matter of fact, many years ago, Rabbi Zohn and Rabbi Glock put together protocols for the medical examiner on what to do during autopsies. We're allowed in during an autopsy to actually watch the autopsy, to see, like Rabbi Zohn said, that the way Hashem put us here is the way that we should be going back to Him. So anything and everything that we can collect in the medical examiner's office during an autopsy, we make sure. We are there even if it's not an autopsy, a regular examination. But a lot of times there's some dam. We make sure that anything that has blood on it gets saved and goes for burial with the nifter. And there's a lot of things even in the medical examiner office. We're here to expedite it. One of the things that we have to do with the families is explain to them the procedure of the medical examiner. When you use the word expedite, people think in half hour, everything is finished and over with. We have to explain to them what expedite means in a city agency. We have to prepare them for any issues. I just had a few weeks ago a case where someone died in a car accident in New Mexico. New Mexico is worse than a third country. It took us 2 days longer to get the nifter out of there because the office is closed, I'm not available, it may snow, it may rain, anything like that. They're not into it, they don't understand what expediting means, and they have all the time in the world. So you have to discuss with the family how it works, what the procedures are and the protocols, and when you're doing that, it also helps put the family at ease. Everyone is in a rush, everyone is in a hurry, everyone wants it buried right away, and we know that, and we have to work with them to the best that we can to get them moving, and they understand it. We've met with them many times. A lot of things have changed, Rabbi Zohn, since COVID. COVID set everything back, but Baruch Hashem, we were able to get things moving now in the right direction. The last topic I want to touch, Rabbi Zohn mentioned it. I just want to maybe add a little bit, Rabbi Zohn, is cremation. Cremation is very, very difficult to work. We as chaplains have to understand also what you have to know what to say when it comes to cremation. People hear the word cremation and right away, I'm going to throw you out a scenario. You tell me what you would do. A person tells the family member that wants to cremate, no, it's against the Jewish law, it's no good for the soul, you can't do that. And the family member turns to the chaplain and says, well, he really wasn't a practicing Jew, so now what do? You're stuck. You have no answer. We use the word tradition. There are very few Jews today from the older generation. Unfortunately, the younger generation, it's getting worse. But from the older generation, there are very few Jews today that don't have some type of a tradition. It could be a yahrzeit light. It could be a Kaddish on Yom Kippur. That shows that there's tradition. That shows that they have tradition and they keep tradition. And that's the way that you're going to work on them to try to avoid a cremation, is by tradition. Rabbi Zohn mentioned about making aware. Rabbi Zohn has different ways of doing it. His way is, correct way, but I just want to add to Rabbi Zohn's way. When you have, a lot of people have, whether it's a maid, a nanny, someone taking care of their elderly family member, co-worker, and you know that it's a question. You know you're not sure what they're going to do. You can get into a conversation with them about their family. You can get into a conversation, where are your parents buried? I would say 8.5 out of 10 times they're going to tell you if the parent is buried or the parent is cremated. And then then their red flag is raised. And then you have to work on it. That's one way. A lot of times they may say, really we want to cremate, we want to bury, but cremation is much cheaper. There's a red flag, and that usually is not a problem to be able to get money to cover the burial. This is basically my presentation. We're here anytime anyone has any questions or how to deal with something or has a problem and needs help. Our office number, everyone seems to know. Feel free, they'll connect you to whoever it is, myself or somebody else to take care of it. And we should all be matzliach in everything that we're doing here, lishma. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you. Who controls remains after death? Chaplain Korsinsky is also legal counsel for Uscc. It's my honor to introduce Chaplain Michael Korsinsky.
Thank you. It's a privilege and honor to be here today and participating in this discussion. Before I start, I wanted to acknowledge the hard work and dedication that Chaplain Mendy, Coën, and all the other chaplains here who put in countless hours in for our efforts for the community. I very much appreciate that. I also wanted to acknowledge Uscc. I know I've dealt with them and a number of clients over the years, and I even had a client who contributed significantly, and they had the privilege to have a number of events. It was when was the event? Hanukkah, right? for the orphans, right?
I didn't know you, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I also had the privilege to work with Rabbi Zohn a number of times on some challenging matters over the years. So as a trust and estates attorney, we receive calls all the time that seek various areas of advice in various areas of law. Many of these matters are emergencies. They require urgent responses. Someone may have a heart attack. We have a number of brain death cases over the years, car accidents and strokes. Even on the lesser emergency cases, in all these matters, the emotions are high. There's lots of stress. The last thing that anyone wants to deal with is having to deal with a legal hurdle. And unfortunately, even in the best case scenarios where everyone gets along, there still can be legal problems. And what I found is that in many of these instances, but not all, they can be avoided or at least minimized with advanced planning. And I know that Rabbi Zohn briefly mentioned about living wills, and we're going to try to focus on is on some other advanced directives to at least identify them. I'm not here to tell you how to fill them out. That you may want to speak to your Rav. You may want to speak to, if you are giving advice to other people, you don't dispense legal advice, you tell them who you should speak to. I also happen to be General Counsel for Chaim Maruchim, which is a part of Agudas Yisrael of America, and they do have this form. It's available for 37 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and District of Columbia. And these forms are legal forms, as Rabbi Zohn was mentioning. The way they're structured is that it's an advanced directive that says that I want this and this particular person to make healthcare decisions for me. And the way this form is written, it actually says that you should consult a rabbi. The definition of the rabbi, who that rabbi is someone that the person is to select that's aligned for that. So I actually gave out a little handout, kind of briefly discussing some of these things. So I'm kind of here to help you issue spot and identify where there are issues and identify when it's advisable to use these forms when necessary. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that there's something called the Federal Patient Self-Determination Act, and that is the federal law that every healthcare facility needs to comply with, and basically says a number of things, but one of the things in there, it requires the hospitals to educate their patients and staff about medical ethics and the availability of advanced directives. So what you'll find is a lot of hospitals will have the New York State Advanced Directive healthcare form. So when it comes to healthcare decisions, they're gonna give you this form. It's a New York State form. It's a pretty basic form, and it could be filled out and completed. However, it doesn't fit everyone's needs. In fact, in our firm, we don't even use that form. We have our own form, which includes other areas. For those who want to use the Chaim Aruchim or Agudas Yisrael of America form, there's that form available as well. Now, people ask, well, what is the law if you don't have the form? What's the rule? So there's something called the Uniform Healthcare Decisions Act, which is, I believe now at 21 states, including New York. The law basically says that if there is no advance directive and if there's no guardian appointed, then there's a list of people who the hospital could look towards to see if that person makes a decision. So in many situations, it seems not like a problem. If someone is married, no issues, you go to the spouse. If someone has children and there's no spouse, the children make the decision. But here's where the problem lies. Number one, we've seen a number of cases over the years where the children don't see eye to eye on various issues. Another common scenario we have seen is where there is a spouse, but the spouse is elderly. And then the situation is difficult because they have, children have one parent in the hospital, and then they have the other parent who has to now make those decisions. And that parent now gets pulled by different children about making different decisions. And it reminds me of a story we had a number of years ago, not that long ago, during COVID, towards the tail end of COVID. We had an older woman come to our office to do routine estate planning. She came in with her 2 daughters. She didn't have a spouse anymore. And very friendly, very nice, everything was great. These, we're going over the financials. Yes, I need a will and I need a trust and whatever she needed to do Medicaid planning. But when it came to healthcare decisions, she says, these children, my daughters, they care so much about me. They love me. They know exactly what I need to do. And that's great. And we continue our conversation, what needs to get done. And in the course of the conversation, it came up, about where COVID shots came up. And when it somehow came up, I remember the exact scenario, how we were speaking about it. But as soon as it came up, both said, I think the words they use is definitely not and definitely yes. Both at the same time. Both daughters said that. And the mother looked like, well, what exactly are we going to do here? Both daughters cared very much about mom. But their views were very different. They were both Orthodox, but just from different neighborhoods and different views of different Rabbanim who were guiding them. Suffice it to say, that mother did not want to leave our office until she had a healthcare proxy in her hand before she left. She did not want to walk out of there without one. Of course, we did the other planning a different date. So the healthcare, so I have on my chart here about different types of advanced directives. Advanced directives is exactly that. It's a direction that's given in advance, and it's best to do it as early as possible. Of course, it could be changed and revoked many times. As Rabbi Zohn said, you could give it at 18-year-old, but people usually wait when they're older to do it. But definitely they need to revisit this, and we tell people every few years to revisit their entire estate plan because things have changed. Someone may have the advanced directive. I had a call today about someone who had advanced directives who put their wife on it, but then they ended up getting divorced, and she was still the one in charge. So it wasn't revoked. There were, so these things need to be, assessed and addressed, especially if they're using the Chaim Aruchim form, where you put in, your rabbi they want to be advised. You may want to change that over time. Move to different communities. You may have relied on a rabbi that no longer is able to give advice in these areas. So the key is, and I think Rabbi Zohn touched upon this as well, is to be able to think about it when you're able to discuss it and think about it and spend time as to what your wishes are. These are all very important issues. Who should make your healthcare decisions? Who should make your financial decisions? All of these are advanced directives. And you don't want to leave it on the hospital to make those decisions either, because I had spoken to a doctor a few months ago. I was in Minneapolis, and top surgeon, we were having a conversation about these topics, and he's an Orthodox doctor. He told me that the medical ethics over the last 10 years have changed significantly. He said so much so that things that they're doing today, 10 years ago would be deemed murder, and they would lose their licenses. So when you have under the federal act where the hospitals need to educate you and tell you about advice, they're going to, what I've been noticing lately is they've been gearing those opinions more to end life earlier, save costs. A lot of it is cost related, interestingly enough. And they don't necessarily share the views of both the Jewish and the Christian, because I notice this is an issue that we have with the Christianity as well, where they also have beliefs where you don't do about brain death and those issues. I'll get to that in a moment. So it's very important to have advanced directives. And one of them is called, like was he mentioned, the healthcare directive, living wills, it's called the proxy directive in New Jersey. Different names, different slide forms in different states, but basically pretty much every state has some sort of form about this. When it comes to financial, we also suggest that people look into these issues and assess that, because we've had many situations where failure to have appropriate advanced planning can cost not only a lot of headaches for the family, but can cost a tremendous amount of money. We've had people who've lost a few $100,000 to millions of dollars in taxes because they didn't do advanced planning. We've had people, our office gets calls every day about Medicaid planning. This is an area that, the average person who has a home and some money in the bank that they worked very hard over their lifetime could be wiped out in a very short period of time if they don't do Medicaid planning or advanced planning. So people can't qualify for Medicaid if they need long-term care. Now, if people don't have these advanced directives and they're kind of stuck, the process to get a judge involved can be very expensive, and that's a guardianship or conservatorship in different states. We've been involved in this state as well as in many other states, these guardianships. They are very difficult, very complex, and really painful for the family. They don't want to have to testify, they have to testify. And in almost all these situations, especially in New York, where there's all these different court-appointed people, I have a case going on right now where there's a fight about which nursing home someone should go to. This is an upstate New York case. We're having a very difficult time because some of the family said she should go into one nursing home. The other part of the family says go into another nursing home. One has better care. The other one is more has kosher food and a better environment, and they just can't agree on it. So now, who's going to make that decision? A judge is going to make that decision. A judge who's not part of the community at all, and it's just a very big challenge. So the point I'm trying to say is to try to educate people to consider doing advanced directives as early as possible. These documents can be revoked. There should be care when you're dealing with power of attorney for financial issues, because you want to be careful who you have. You kind of give them certain powers. The standard power of attorney does give a lot of power, so you want to make sure you do it correctly. There are other advanced directives that people need to be aware of. DNRs and DNIs, which is do not resuscitate and do not intubate. These are actually not forms that you fill out. This is the hospital fills this out. And I remember I was on vacation last year around this time, Shiva week. I get a call from Chaim Aruchim, an emergency case in Denver, 1 hour to Shabbos. And we had to deal with this case where the doctor put notes in the chart that the person is DNR and DNI. That was not true. There was health. They actually had the Chaim Aruchim got a form that gave explicit instructions not to do that, and the hospital did not want to obey that, and they decided to not listen to that. We had to escalate it and get to higher level of the executive offices of the hospital to do this, and this went right into Shabbos. Turns out later that night, like 2 a.m, she did have cardiac arrest, and if not for getting our work done, a few hours earlier, because we knew that she was going in and out, and that happened, they would have just not honored it. So, timing is sometimes crucial on these things. Regarding bringing guardianships, if there is no one out there, and there's no healthcare proxy, no power of attorney, really family members, even nursing homes, my office brings guardianships on behalf of not only family members, but we do it on behalf of nursing homes, hospitals. We even represent the state, bringing in guardianships in certain circumstances. Really, any interested party could do it. We've brought it for Holocaust associations. The Big Oklahoma Bar Park had brought guardianships as well. We brought it for them. So I know time is short, so I'm kind of going to jump along here. But I wanted to mention that there are other situations, even with advanced directives, they can't solve every problem. We've had to bring guardianships, even when someone had a will and a trust and a power of attorney and healthcare proxy and had everything. But it's not 100% foolproof, and we have to go before a judge. I bring one case here in my outline here is the case of Nakar versus New York Presbyterian Hospital. This is a case, unfortunately, we had a number of times we had to bring similar cases since 2019. My last one was about 6 months ago. We had to go to a judge at midnight to get something signed to prevent a brain death situation where the hospital just had, the hospital doctors who were in charge at that time decided they're going to do their own, they're going to follow their own way of doing things, and there's a kind of a dispute in the law about some areas about brain death. And if there's a problem about, if anyone were to encounter that issue, they should reach out to someone who's knowledgeable in this area. There are a number of people who know how to deal with that. I've seen Rabbanim make mistakes in this area, and the trick here in many places is to prevent the hospital from making the examinations, because once those exams are done, it's very hard to kind of, reverse that. So in the case of Nakar, which is a leading case here in Kings County in Brooklyn, the hospital, against the family's wishes and against the directions under the healthcare proxy, said we're going to do brain death testing anyway. And they did it, and they declared the person brain dead and issued a death certificate. Now, that was against halacha in that specific case. And this, I'm not going to be a rabbi, I'm not going to paskin, but there are various different types of cases when you're allowed to do it, how you're allowed to do it. You got to consult your, local rabbi for that. But actually, you shouldn't consult just your local rabbi, someone familiar with these areas. But in that case, in the car, it turns out that the hospital made an error, and they reversed the death certificate and issued a new one for about a year later when he passed away through natural causes. We've had to go to, the one that I had not long ago, as I mentioned a few months ago, I had a hospital who did not want to comply. It was a Catholic hospital. I actually showed the general counsel that they followed the Catholic rules, and the archdioceses have their own definition of brain death, and I educated the lawyers for the hospital. Take a look at your own website. It says your own protocols, you have to not do it. So they actually step back, and they've been very good about that. Some hospitals are better than others. We had one in Indiana, a case about last year. I did this with Meyer Korsinsky together. We had an emergency case also. For some reason, a university hospital in Indiana insisted on doing brain death, and against the family's wishes. And we were able to successfully work this out so they didn't do that. And final area about dispositions of remains, which is what we were talking about earlier about cremations. Likewise, I've had a number of cases over the years on that. Believe it or not, going to court on a cremation issue is not fun. It was the one that's memorable is one where there was an alleged girlfriend that claimed that she gets to make the decisions, and for $250,000 she'll avoid cremation. So the family, we didn't know whether she was really going to do the cremation or not, and we had to run to court. We got in front of a judge fairly quickly, and it was determined that she was not considered the domestic partner. The laws have changed over the years since I've been doing this. The original laws on cremation said spouse makes that decision. Then they added domestic partner. And the definition of domestic partner has been changed over the years as well. Most recently, the law has changed in the last year and a half, where it's majority wins, meaning that under the law, it says if there is no advance directive, again, we keep on mentioning this again, have advance directives, there's a form, the one that I saw that, what's it called, last kindness, right? There's a form that is here, filling out a form like that is giving written instructions that there be no cremation, for example. But absent such a form, what ends up happening is, if there's no spouse, it goes to the children. Now, if there's 3 children, meaning if there's more than 2 children, majority wins. And we had, unfortunately, a case, I think Rabbi Zohn, you had sent me this matter, I couldn't do anything because the funeral director, which was a Jewish funeral home, said, I have to oblige by the rules, which is majority wins of the children. There were 3 children. 2 said cremate, 1 said no. Not much we can do about it. Actually, nothing we can do about it. So it's crucial to have these advance directives. And I know we had mentioned there's a lot of issues, legal issues out there, and my suggestion is as early that someone notices a problem, they should alert the appropriate people. I know Chaim Aruchim has very good resources. I know I'm general counsel to them. I don't usually see the specific matters that come up. It's only the ones that make it up the chain to me. And for some reason, it always shows up on Friday afternoon or on a Saturday night on a long holiday weekend. But it's important to address it as early as possible, because I had one case where the local rabbi did say, oh yeah, it's just brain testing, let them do it, no big deal. They just won't declare him brain dead. Well, we had a problem, because that's actually the problem. We don't want the testing to occur. We want to, once you have the testing, once the testing is done, it's very hard to, new laws kick in, and it becomes very difficult to, reverse that. And that's the same issues where I've recently looked at, I think with a good, the protocols, I think the medical examiners always wanted to change it slightly, and I will tell you that the New York City has been very accommodating overall, but should there be an issue, do not hesitate to reach out to counsel. I'm sure USCC you can call, and they'll, Mendy Coën will give the direction where to see if you can get different resources. Even our office will help out in a situation like this. But for example, if they say we're not going to release the body, or we're going to take the body for testing, Chaplain Coën was mentioning about, babies being, they take the babies for testing, because after the baby dies, the family doesn't want that. It could be against halacha. So it's very, very important to if there's a problem, push for it. You can advocate at hospitals, both when people are in the hospital, you push for it. There's a lot of resources in the community. There are connections in the hospitals. You can speak to various organizations, whether it's Chaim Aruchim or the USCC, or you can speak to different organizations who can contact people within the hospital network to try to get things done. I mean, I have general counsel's number to a lot of hospitals. And if there's a problem, I reach out to them and I tell them I've got a problem, and they will stop a lot of things in the tracks until we figure out what the next step is. And they won't do testing of, they won't take bodies and just start doing it for medical purposes, for educational purposes. So I did want to just give you, also on my documents here that I gave out here, I have a resource page of different numbers that you can call or need if you ever need it. And anyone who didn't have a handout, I can give you another one. I have the Chaim Aruchim number, which has this separate Sephardic 24-hour hotline, which is staffed by Rabbanim 24/7. They will give the halachas of when you can even do DNR, DNI. I was under the initial impression that there's no such thing as having a DNR, ever. You have to preserve life, but there are times where there's ways that they can tell them to do a DNI or DNR. I also put in here, just so people should have it, for some people that asked about having the estate tax exclusion and the Medicaid assets and income requirements. So I put that in here. If anyone has any specific questions, I know time is short. But I did want to put it in there in case anyone wants to ask me questions about Medicaid and how they work. I'm here to help. And again, thank you everyone for your time.
Zohn, Bishus, my good friend and partner in Chevra Kadisha. I work for him in Misaskim. And Bishus Michael Korsinsky, who are just, not that he needs my approbation at all, but as a nursing home administrator, I can tell you that I've spoken to even from doctors who are very quick to quote unquote pull the plug. As someone who's in the year for his mother, I could tell you how much estate planning can save you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars between Medicaid and between when you sell property. So it's really important to follow what he says. So when Mendy Chaplain Mendy chose tonight's date, I don't think he realized what kind of apropos date it would be. First of all, in today's daf, it's talking about Mesim. It's talking about different, what's considered as tumah, what's not tumah, certain things, what you're still allowed to use, what you're not allowed to use, if it's apropos. That's one. Two is this week's Pasha, because the saying of Chacham Lev Yikach Mitzvahs applies to this week's Pasha, because Moshe Rabbeinu, while everyone else was getting the booty, Moshe Rabbeinu went for Atzmais Yosef. He went for the bones of Yosef. And what happens at the end, not only did Moshe Rabbeinu get rich on it, but because of that, he had the schus of having the Rabbi Shalom himself being the one that buried him. So I don't believe you could have picked a more apropos night tonight. So thank you for this. I'd like to start. There's a Chassan Sofer that talks about in the Gemara on Shabbos Nun Hey Yom Beis and Baba Basri Yad Zayin. Says there are 4 people that died only because of the Nachash, only because of the sin of the snake, which caused Adam and Chava to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Because of that, no one was able to live forever. But there are 4 people who had no Averis. That was Binyamin ben Yaakov Avinu, Amram, the father of Moshe, Yishai, the father of David and Melech, and Kilev, the son of David. So the Chassan Sofer asks, why aren't those people the ones that we look up to? Why aren't they, quote unquote, the Avis? Why aren't they Manhigim? Like, we barely know much about them. Why do we pick Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov? And the answer is because the Avis were willing to get their hands dirty. They were willing to get involved. Doesn't take much to be a tzaddik in your own dalar amis, in your own four corners, and not getting involved. Doesn't take much. What the Rabbi Shalom wants is people who are going to get involved. You're going to make some mistakes here and there, so what? But he wants the people going to get involved. That's what chaplains do. That's what Chevra Kadisha do over here. And that's what why the people sitting in this room are very special. I just would like to give a shout out first because many members over here are from the Chevra Kadisha of Flatbush. And we couldn't do it without you all, including a certain Coën sitting in the back also. Okay. Anyway, okay. So what we do is pretty unique, and the fact is, I believe it's just the 2 hospitals in Flatbush, in Community Hospital and in Mount Sinai, and I believe Maimonides also does it, but no one else really has it. We have call 24/7. Other groups have people or someone on call, but we have a whole schedule of people who are on call 24/7 to answer the calls. So the first thing you need before you start a Chevra Kadisha, before you touch any mace, you got to have a Rav. We're Zechat to have Rabbi Lezer David Rappaport, and the reason why he's so good to have, because he actually was a member of the Chevra Kadisha. He does Taharis, he does explorations, he knows what we're talking about to get the answers equally, and you have a Rav to follow, and it saves you from a lot of headaches. Another thing that we try to do is we try to train the hospital staff. Now, this is very challenging because the hospital staff keeps on big turnover. You just got to follow procedures, and yes, they mess up a lot, and that's why people like Chaplain David Adon Alum, who are involved, are part of the training and constantly training the nurses. If you go into a hospital in the city who don't have anyone, most of them will respect. You tell them that the rabbi is coming, most of them will respect, and they won't touch anything. The most important thing you can do is have covered and mace. Now, the problem is that when you're going to the people of other religions who don't really care about the mace, they are not handling the mace properly. That's where we come in over here because we're there within 20, we're there 20 minutes. And I'm saying 20 specifically because for halachic reasons, we don't do anything before 20 minutes. 20 minutes after, we're the ones who handle properly. Now, if you go, you're going to watch the non-religious people, they'll end up with crossed hands. They'll take a lot of the blood, they'll throw it out. They'll take a lot of the Band-Aids with all the hair on it, they'll throw it out, which for us is not permitted because we bury it all. So that's why they know as soon as we come in, we do everything. Recently I did a call in NYU, unfortunately, for a little kid. They were very respectful. As soon as you walk in over there, you tell them, they're the rabbi, what do you need, what can we help you? There are some times where you need them to help you because of either just surgical stuff that, beyond our scope, or from halachic reasons, but obviously tznius takes precedence in everything we do. We try to get the families to cooperate as far as doing a tahara. You try to encourage them to do a tahara. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We have a certain member over here who not only someone encouraged Tahara, but he's ended up saying Kaddish for the person for this year because he was matzliach with it. As Rabbi Zohn said before, a lot of, unfortunately, the Russians, big problems. They want to get dressed in their suits. They want to, have the matzevis with all the pictures on it. If I recall, I know I'm going to botch a little, but Rabbi Zohn, many years ago, when he spoke for us, he said that one way is try to convince him is that your father was a good dresser, and you're going to go to the party, and everyone's dressed one way, and your father's dressed in a different way. How's it going to look? It's like he's wearing pajamas when everyone else is wearing tachrichim. That's inappropriate. So there are different ways. You could try to do your best. Some people insist, and there's nothing you could do about it. Perhaps I hope I didn't botch that too much. Okay, but that's you try to encourage them as much as possible. You try to get them at Tahara. There are a number of the funeral homes on Coney Island Avenue who do have Shmullah Carpet does Taharas on them. You try to encourage them, and you see it. Most of the problem is you just got to tell them it's free. Of course, once they're paying for it, they don't want to do it. You tell them it's free. And Kehillah Chapel, that's what we do at the Taharas. It's free. You have Borough Park, but obviously most of these Russians are not going to Borough Park. As far as the ME, our job, sometimes the hospital, anyone under 60 is required. They're required to call the ME. ME could be a problem. If that happens, we just call Meyer or call Misaskim right away, and they take care of it. As I said before, there's the bloods, the hair, the tape, that all got to be buried. There is one hospital, shall remain nameless, where the chaplain says, "I take care of everything." He instructs all the goyim what to do. And I said, even the blood on the stretchers, they all know what to do. Okay, we're not trusting any guy to do everything properly because it's pretty much standard. Anyway, so we actually we'll pick up the blood there's blood on the floors, there's blood on the stretchers, there's blood on the cot. There's a lot of things, and how do you do it? You got to get trained to do it. You shouldn't just start picking up on your own over here. But we've been trained by Rabbi Rappaport, and we've been doing this with a lot of experience. So much so that we also do it for the women, even though we've had this discussion of getting women to the Chevra Kadisha. But for going on a call at 2 a.m, you're going to ask a lot more halach shailas than. Yeah, okay. But it's for explorations. The different explorations at Tahara, explorations when we go with the person's difta. So there's bigger problems if you go at 2 a.m. and you're going to go with women over there, you're going to have a lot more problems. So that's why we do it, but we also know tznius, we also know how to do things, with experience you learn to do things. Taharas, of course, are done only by ladies, and really anything you try to do, the main thing is everything you should do is for covered mace. And on Shabbos, as much as you try and you want to do Shabbos, a mace is muktzah. And there's very extreme circumstances where with kicker, tinnik, whatever, but that's something you could ask your own halachic Orthodox rabbi. Just please note that when you ask a Rav, most Rabbanim do not know this stuff. They're not getting involved. You need mumchas, you need specialists like Rabbi Zohn, like Rabbi Rappaport. You have to know who to ask. Because they don't know the answers over here, So just ask properly, and again, and everything with Uscc is chus, and Bilal Mavas and Netzach, Hashem Elokim Dimah Me'al Kol Ponim.